You pulled it. Say it. Say you pulled the switch. Sign it. And this whole thing is over.
And then what happens to Emmett?
Then he stops being a man who lets a kid take the blame.
That's not what he is.
That's what the file says. 6 years, that's what the file has said.
Uncle Del, what's that number on the tag?
What tag?
On the power box. There's a number, and there's a name line under it.
That's the machine number.
It's got a name line.
Give me that.
You said I could read the file.
You can read the file. Thursday. Sign it Thursday, and you can read whatever you want.
The paper went back in the folder. The folder went under Del Ashby's arm. 11 miles north of that kitchen table stood a building where nobody had turned on a light in 4 hours. Inside it, a machine sat waiting to be told what to do. A grain mixer is a steel drum the size of a bedroom, laid on its side with steel ribbons welded down the shaft in a spiral. Switch it on and it sounds like surf. Men who work around them say that, and they are not being poetic. It takes 30 seconds to come up to speed. Hold on to that number. 30 seconds is how 11 men climbed out of that drum, laughing. The 12th one did not. 20 minutes after the folder went under his arm, Del Ashby stood in his own garage with the bench light on. He opened the second drawer from the bottom of his father's toolbox. He looked into it about 4 seconds. Then he shut it, turned off the light, and went in the house. He had been doing that about once a month for 6 years. "You out here?" A voice called from the kitchen door. "Looking for a socket. You find it?" "Yeah," Del said. "I found it." At 1 in the morning on the 8th of September, there was one light burning in the whole Halstead grain terminal, and it was strapped to a man's head. A headlamp gives you a circle about a meter wide. For 8 hours, that circle is the world. The hands in it were split across the knuckles, and the left thumbnail was black, and they had been running this route, alone, on nights, for 6 years. "You already locked it." "I did." "Then why are you doing that?" The helper was 19 and 5 weeks on the job. His name was Rudy, and he asked it the way a person asks about a stranger's tattoo. Emmett had the power box open. He reached in with a plastic puller, took out 2 fuse blocks, one and then the other, and slid them into his back pocket. "Because I want to." "Man, nobody does that." "I know. That's like locking your truck and then taking the steering wheel with you." "Yes," Emmett said. "That is exactly what it is like. You gonna do that every night?" "Every night." "For how long?" 6 years so far." Rudy laughed at him. Everybody laughed at him about the fuses. In 6 years, not one person had asked him why. In the morning, the sun comes through the roof vents and lands on the crib floor in 4 long bars, and the dust hangs in them and turns. It is the most beautiful thing in that building, and it is also why nobody strikes a match within 60 feet of the doors. At the end of the shift, he walked his lock back to the tool crib. The woman behind that counter had run it for 30 years and did not hand out a tool without writing it down. She took his lock, checked the number stamped in the brass, and hung it on the peg under his name. 604. 604. You know why I stamped them myself? You've told me. Tell it back to me. 1 lock, 1 key, 1 man. Every lock in this building has a number, and every number has a man. I put them in the brass myself. Marva Kolstad turned the board a 1/4 inch straight. Nobody gets to be nobody in my crib. Out in the lot, Del Ashby had his trunk open, digging out a jack handle for somebody with a flat. Under the edge of a folded moving blanket, 6 inches of them showing, were 2 rubber grips. Red. The kind that go on long bolt cutters. He got the handle and shut the lid. Nobody said anything about it. Thursday the 25th was the annual safety meeting. 90 folding chairs in the maintenance bay. Every year they run the same training video, and every year it uses the same case study, because it happened in that building. Every year, Emmett Crandall sits in that room while a photograph of a power box comes up on the wall and a voice explains what went wrong. "You going Thursday?" Rudy asked him once. "Everybody goes." "Yeah, but do you have to?" "Yes," Emmett said. "I have to." Thursday would be the 6th time. This year, there was an item on the agenda ahead of the video. 17 days from that morning, in front of 90 people and 2 urns of coffee, the terminal was going to hand Del Ashby a plaque, Director of Safety. From October forward, every man who climbed inside a machine in that building would be climbing in on his signature. The letter came on the 9th of September, and it was 2 paragraphs long. The Federal Safety Agency was auditing the terminal's records ahead of permit renewal. Every fatality file from the last decade had to be reconfirmed in writing by the parties named in it. 3 signatures: the plant manager, the witness, the responsible employee. Emmett read it at the front counter with his hat in his hand. That's it? I just signed that I said what I said? That's it. Mr. Crandall, we just need your signature confirming what you already said. He put the letter in his coat and sat in the truck the while without starting it. Here's what 6 years does. It turns a thing into furniture. He had signed the first statement 11 days after Merle Ashby died, in a room with a company lawyer, and wrote the sentence they gave him. I permitted a minor child in an active machinery area. It was true, so he signed it. And when the boy came to live with him 9 days later, he never corrected the story because he believed it. He drove to Dutch Peevler's house that night, which he had not done in 4 years. Dutch was the union rep. He had lost every grievance he filed at Halstead since the accident, and he answered the door with a plate in his hand. I need to ask you a legal thing. Come in. If that file closes with my name on it as the responsible party, what happens to the guardianship? Dutch set the plate down. Say that again. Merle's will named me. County signed off on it 6 years ago. But if a federal record says I let a child into a machine area and a man died, and now I signed it twice, what does that do? By itself, nothing. He's 17, he's a year out. And if he wants out early, then he petitions, and he says the words emancipation, and no judge in this state is going to fight him about it. Dutch looked at him. Emmett, is he saying that? No. Then why are you in my kitchen? So? Because Dell's got him signing something Thursday? Emmett said. And because I would rather lose the trade than lose that kid signing a paper that says he's better off away from me. Dutch pulled a chair out with his foot. Asked the real question. If a thing in that file is wrong, who fixes it? Nobody. A closed file is closed. There has to be a way. There's one and you won't like it. Dutch sat down across from him. Somebody proves it wrong before the state stops caring, and the state stops caring on a schedule. On the 11th, he went to the training room on his lunch and got the binder out of the cabinet. The photograph is on page 9, black and white, off a copier. A power box on a wall, a hasp on the handle, a tag hanging from it. He had looked at that page every year for 6 years, the way you look at the back of a cereal box. That day he looked at the bottom edge. The image sits inside a layout box. The photograph does not fill that box. It is short at the bottom. He stood in an empty training room with a binder in his hands and felt the floor move. Somebody cut 2 knuckles off the bottom of that picture. You greased that same fitting 3 times, Rudy said at 2 in the morning. Did I? Want me to take the deck? No, Emmett said. I want you to go home on time for once. The next afternoon, Dell found him in the lot. That was new. In 6 years, Dell Ashby had never once come across a parking lot to talk to Emmett Crandall. He came all the way across it now with his hands out of his pockets. Hey, you get the letter? I got it. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what it is. Dell leaned on the fender of the next truck over. Emmett, you carried it 6 years. You never said one word about that boy, not to me, not to anybody. I know what that cost. You don't. All right, I don't. He let that sit, and he let it sit exactly the right amount of time. Sign the thing. Let the kid put it down. He's going to sign Thursday, and then it's a file in a drawer in Chicago, and he can go be 17. And what does he put down exactly? You know what he puts down. Say it out loud. Dell straightened up off the fender. He puts down that he pulled a switch when he was 11 years old and his father died, he said. And I have spent 6 years making sure that boy can get out of bed anyway, so don't stand in this lot and make me say it prettier than that. He walked away, and then he came back 4 steps and put his hand on Emmett's shoulder, once. And then he left. Emmett stood there with his keys in his hand. He put his hand on my shoulder in that lot. He has never done that before. The county sheriff keeps the original photographs in the case file. A records request on a closed fatality is a form. $20 and 8 business days. Unless you know the woman at the counter. Some of these are the machine, Emmett. I know what's in there. I'm saying it out loud so you don't open it in a parking lot and get hit with something. That's exactly where I'll open it. She gave it to him on the 12th at 4 in the afternoon, in a manila envelope with the rubber band around it. He opened it on his tailgate in the courthouse lot. 22 photographs, 4 by 6. The 11th is the power box. He set the binder copy beside it. Same picture, same angle. Except the original goes down 2 knuckles further. And in those 2 knuckles, there is a padlock through the hasp and a tag hanging off it. The tag has a number stamped at the top and a name in pencil on the line underneath. 1109, M. Ashby. Emmett Crandall sat down on the tailgate of his own truck. Somewhere behind his eyes, a mixer came up to speed, and it sounded the way they always sound, like water coming in. He knew what that meant. Anybody in that building would. That box was locked out. When a box is locked out, there is no power past it. You can pull that lever all day, and nothing on the other end will so much as hum. The switch on the crib floor could not start that mixer. It was not physically possible. For 6 years, an 11-year-old had gone to sleep believing he killed his father with an act that could not have done it. And Emmett had believed it too. For 3 days, he did nothing with it. He worked. He came home at 8 in the morning, made eggs for a 17-year-old, and said nothing. A man with a photograph and no lock is one more man with an opinion. On the night of the 14th, he took Dutch Peevler down onto the crib floor with the lights off and stood him in front of the mixer. They talked inside the circle of one headlamp. Hear this and don't say anything for a minute. Go. The box was locked out. Merle's lock was on it. Merle's tag was on it. Say that again. It's in the original photograph. It has been cut out of every copy anybody in that plant has looked at for 6 years. Dutch looked at the drum. That is a hard thing to do with a light on your head. Your beam finds part of it at a time. The rest stays where it is. Emmett, you understand what that makes the last 6 years? I understand exactly what it makes them. No, it does not just make the file wrong. Dutch's voice went low. It makes every night you sat across a table from that kid and did not correct him a thing you did to him. So, you're not telling me anything I haven't had for 3 days, Emmett said. He turned his head, and the circle went off the mixer and onto the wall, and Dutch was standing in the dark. Then say the next part out loud. There has to be a cut lock. Somewhere in this county there is a piece of brass with a hole in it. Until I put my hand on it, I am a man with a crooked photograph and a grudge. On the 15th, Marva was locking the crib when he got there at 6. I need the lockboard. You need to eat something. You look like a paper sack. Marva. She turned the lamp on and pulled the allocation book, a hardbound ledger she has kept since before half of the plant was born. Wow. What am I looking for? 11:09. Her hand stopped. You want to sit down first? No. Then I'll say it standing up. She turned to the page. Merle's lock came back to me on the 14th of October. 3 days after. Dell brought it, and it was not cut. What? It was whole. Key in it, not a mark on it. She put her finger on the line. I wrote it down because I write everything down. Returned intact, D. Ashby. That's impossible. I have been telling somebody that for 6 years. Marva, if a man is inside a machine and the only key is in his pocket and somebody needs that box open, then the lock gets cut. That's the only way it opens. That's right. So there has to be the cut lock, somewhere. In a drawer, in a bin, in a bucket. Marva reached under the counter and brought out a coffee can with the label gone and no lid. That's where they go. 30 years. That is where every dead lock in this building has gone. She tipped it toward the lamp. 6 padlocks. 2 with the shackles snipped clean. 1 with a broken key stub. 3 with the bodies split. 1994, 2001, 2009. Nothing from that year. There is no cut lock in this building. There has to be one. Where is it? Marva closed the book. Sit down a minute. Marva, sit down. She took her glasses off. You want to know why nobody ever asked what a child was doing in here on a Saturday? I know why, because I let it happen. You did not let anything happen. Merle brought that boy in every Saturday for 2 years. Short shift, 8 to noon. She said it like a fact off a shipping ticket. And every Saturday I paid him $5 out of my own pocket to sweep the crib floor. You never told me that. He counted it in front of me. Every time. Out loud, 5 ones on this counter. She put her hand flat where he had done it. Merle made him count it so he'd know what it was. Marva. And when they carried Merle out that day, his flashlight was still on. Emmett did not say anything. They set it in the bin in the guard shack with his wallet and his glasses. It burned in there 9 hours before anybody thought to turn it off. Who turned it off? I did. She put her glasses back on. 11 at night. It was still warm in my hand. Marva. 9 hours, Emmett. I want you to think about what that means. About where he was and what he was doing when it happened. On the 13th, 2 nights before, Silas Ashby drove out to the terminal at 10 at night. He parked on the gravel apron by the scale house and shut the engine off. He had done that maybe 30 times in 2 years and never gone in. That night he went in. The fence on the riverside has a gap where the ground washed out. He went through on his stomach, across the rail spur, and in the Northman door, which does not lock and never has. The mixer sits on a raised pad with a steel walk around it. The hatch is 22 inches across, and it was open, the way it always is when the machine is down. He walked to the edge of the pad. Then he took a step, then another, then a third, and then he could not take a fourth. It was not fear. He has said that since and never been able to name what it was. His legs stopped at a specific distance from that hatch, the way a horse stops at a line on the ground. He stood there 11 minutes and went home. 3 steps. He could not make himself take a fourth. On the 14th, Dell had Silas in the driveway teaching him to change the oil. That is a thing a person does with somebody, not for somebody. Crack it slow. It's hot. I got it. Both hands under the pan. Dell was down on one knee on the concrete with his hands black to the second knuckle when the phone went off in his shirt pocket. He wiped 2 fingers on his jeans and read it. Barrow. He pulled the file. Dell put the phone back in his pocket. You want to do the filter or you want me to? I'll do it. Do it. He came closest on the 16th at 7:30 in the morning. You're staring at me. Am I? You've done it 4 days now. Emmett had the coffee pot in his hand and the whole sentence built and standing in his mouth. Silas, the machine was locked out. Your father locked it and put his name on it. Not 1 day of it was yours. Eat, he said. That's what you were going to say? Eat, you've got a bus. Because if he said it and could not prove it, he was one more grown man telling that boy what he remembered. Later that day, a woman named Renata Bly came out from the area office with a clipboard. She spent 4 hours in the front office and 40 minutes in the crib. Emmett caught her at her car. Ma'am, if I told you something in that file was wrong, what happens? Depends what's wrong. A photograph in the training material has been cropped. The original shows a lock and a tag on the box. Renata Bly put her bag on the roof of her car. Say the rest. 6 years ago, a man died inside a mixer here. The file says a child started it. I read that file this morning. Then you read that the child pulled a switch on the crib floor. I did. That box was locked out. There's a padlock and a tag on it in the original photograph. And what does that mean to you? It means there was no power past that box. He could have hung on that lever with both hands and nothing would have moved. Renata Bly wrote 1 line and underlined it. There's a lock removal authorization in the file. I got a copy this morning. He had it folded in his coat. It authorizes cutting padlock 1109, lock holder M. Ashby, authorizing supervisor D. Ashby. That's a normal form. It's got the office timestamp on it, 3:12 in the afternoon. Emmett held it out. The 911 call went at 2:31. That paper is 41 minutes after the ambulance. She read it for a long time. Mr. Crandall, I want to be careful with you because people in your position hear what they need to hear. She handed it back. That paper is bad. That paper is very bad. But a supervisor writing up an authorization after the fact happens constantly, and a lawyer will call it record keeping. Then what isn't record keeping? The lock. If somebody cut a lock and hid it, that's not paperwork. That's a man knowing what he did. She got in the driver's seat and left the door open. And Mr. Crandall, understand something about time. Ma'am, on a workplace fatality, this state has 6 years from the date of the event. Your event is the 11th of October. She looked up at him. The clock is not mine. It belongs to the state, and it stops on the 11th of October. That's 3 weeks. 25 days. After that, whatever you find, nobody is charged with anything that happened in that building 6 years ago. And the file? The file gets reconfirmed Thursday and goes in a vault. So both clocks run out in the same 3 weeks. They do. Renata Bly pulled her door closed and put the window down. Mr. Crandall, one more thing, and then I have to drive. Go ahead. Do not go get that lock. Whatever you think you know about where it is, do not go get it and bring it to me in a bag. She started the car. The day you touch it is the day his lawyer starts talking about you instead of him. On the 17th, Dell sat outside a medical building in Quincy with the phone on speaker. It's for insurance. I paid every one of those bills out of pocket. Sir, I can release records to the patient or a legal guardian. He's 17. Then he can request them himself. He will. Dell watched a woman push a stroller across the lot. But I'd like to know what's in them first. I'll have to ask my supervisor. You do that, Dell said. He was pleasant about it every time he called for the next 4 days. Nobody who took those calls ever wondered why a man wanted 6 years of a child's counseling notes. On the 18th, Emmett came in off shift at 7 in the morning and Silas was at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal he was not eating. You went out to the plant Saturday night. How do you know that? Bah. Because there's a river mud on your bumper, and there's only one place around here you can get river mud on a bumper. Emmett hung his hat on the chair. You go in? Yeah. How far? Silas pushed the bowl an inch. 3 steps onto the pad. And then what? And then nothing. I couldn't. He said it fast. I don't want to talk about that part. All right. Ask me something else. Emmett sat down across from him and put both hands flat on the table. Tell me what you remember. Not what you've been told. What's actually in your head. You know what's in my head. I know what's in the file. I've never once asked you what's in your head, and that is a thing I am going to have to live with. Silas Ashby looked at the table for a while. I pulled it, he said. The switch by the door. The old kind. You pull it and it stays pulled. Okay. And nothing happened. Say that part again. Nothing happened. It was quiet. So I pushed it back in and I pulled it again because I thought maybe I did it wrong. He was not looking up. And nothing happened that time either. And then there was banging down by the electrical room. Somebody hitting something. His hands were flat on the table now too, in the same shape as Emmett's, and neither of them noticed. And then it started. The refrigerator cycled on. How long between the banging and the machine? Not long, a couple seconds. Who did you tell that to? Everybody, at first. Silas finally looked up. They told me I was putting it in the wrong order. Every week for a year. Emmett did not move his hands off that table for a while. He did not trust what the rest of him was doing. Somewhere in a sheriff's evidence photograph, there is a concrete floor. 3 steps from the mixer hatch, an open lunchbox with the lid folded back. Beside it, an apple, whole, 1 small bruise on the shoulder. Merle Ashby was coming out in 10 minutes. On the 19th, Dell was waiting by the truck at shift change with his hands in his jacket. You went to the sheriff. I did. And you went to the tool crib and had Marva open the book. I did that too. That kid finally sleeps, Dell said. There was nothing performed in it, and that is what made it bad. And you were about to take a wrecking bar to the only story he's got that lets him sleep. It's not true. You know a picture's crooked. That's what you know. I know a locked box doesn't start a mixer. Dell took a step in. Here's one you knew 6 years ago. You believed it too. Emmett did not answer. For 6 years, you believed that boy killed his own father. Dell's voice was quiet and level, and it did not go up 1 inch. And you still went home to him. You still signed the school papers. You still called yourself his guardian. Dell, what kind of a man raises a child he thinks did that? Emmett Crandall got in his truck and drove home and did not turn the radio on. On the 20th, Silas came out on the porch while Emmett was scraping the grill. Uncle Dell says you've been going through the accident file. That's right. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't have anything yet. Sure. You had enough to go to a federal inspector. Silas had his hands in his sleeves. You had enough to go to the sheriff and Marva and Dutch. Everybody but me. That's fair. Don't do that. Don't just agree. His voice cracked and came back down. He's been at every game. He's been at every one, Emmett. He drove me to Quincy every other Tuesday for a year and a half and sat in the parking lot. Where were you? I was on nights. You were on the grease line not looking at me. Emmett set the scraper down. That's true too, he said. So don't come at him now like you've been standing guard. Silas went inside and shut the door. Emmett Crandall stood on his own porch with a grill brush in his hand, and then he threw it. It hit the shed hard enough to knock the light off its bracket. The bulb broke. The yard went completely dark. Then he went out and picked up the pieces with his hands, in the dark, the way a man does when he is not ready to go in the house. That same night, Dell went out to the garage and opened that drawer again. This time, he stood there a great deal longer than 4 seconds. Then he shut it and turned the light off and went in the house and did not sleep. Emmett went to that garage on the 21st at 3 in the afternoon. It was a Sunday. Sunday is the day Dell coached the junior program at the field on Route 12. He did not break in. That side door had not locked in years, and everybody in the family knew it. He had helped hang it. The toolbox is a red rolling chest that belonged to Dell and Merle's father. Top drawers are sockets. Bottom drawers are junk. Second drawer from the bottom. Under a coffee can of bolts in a fold of shop rag. A brass padlock. The shackle cut clean through on one side. The cut face still bright, because brass in a rag does not weather. Stamped in the body, under the keyway, 4 digits. 1109. He stood in another man's garage holding the answer, and the first thing he felt was not triumph. He kept it. 6 years in his father's toolbox, and he kept it. He photographed it 9 times and put it back in the same fold of the same rag. You left it there? Dutch said that night. I left it there. He could burn it tomorrow. He's had 6 years to burn it. That's not an answer. It's the only one there is, Emmett said. He is never going to be able to get rid of that thing. That is the only reason any of this works. That is the thing that finally broke him. He did not throw it in the river. He did not put it in a dumpster in another county. He put his brother's lock in his father's toolbox and kept it 6 years, and that is not what a monster does. That is what a man does when he cannot get rid of a thing. On the 22nd, Renata Bly called Emmett from a rest stop outside Springfield. I have your photographs. Where is the object now? Well, where I found it. Good. Do not move it. Do not touch it again. She was writing. I've talked to the district office and I've talked to a lawyer at the state's attorney. I need to say the hard part. Say it. Everything you have proves a lock was cut and concealed. It does not prove he knew there was a man inside that machine. He called down twice. How do you know that? Bob? Because he told the investigators that in year 1. It's in the file. He says he called down twice. He got no answer. The drop light at the hatch was off, so he assumed the job was done. And is that plausible? It is completely plausible, Emmett said. And that's the whole problem. Merle had a vacuum running and hearing protection on, and he carried his own flashlight in with him. Dell had done it 11 times before and been right 11 times. Renata Bly was quiet. Then here is where you are, she said. You need him to do it again, now, in front of somebody, because the only thing that turns careless into knowing is a pattern, and a pattern needs a second one. How long do I have? 19 days. That afternoon, Del Ashby signed the reconfirmation and the office mailed it to a federal regional office. In signing it, he swore the file was accurate and complete to the best of his knowledge. He also signed the lock removal authorization page, again, 6 years later, in blue ink. That is the only crime in this story anybody ever went to prison for. That night, Del Ashby sat in his own driveway with the engine off for 40 minutes. He had signed a federal form that day swearing a file was accurate. Marva had pulled the book. The sheriff had released the envelope. A woman from the government had walked his crib and not looked at him once. He was 9 days from a plaque with his name on it. There's a kind of man who, when the ground starts going under him, does the only thing he has ever known how to do. He goes faster. On the 23rd at 6 in the evening, Emmett stood in the lunchroom doorway with a cup of coffee and said it loud enough for 4 people to hear. I'm doing the tail pulley in the boot tonight. 11:40. Somebody tell Rudy he can sleep in. By yourself? It's my line. Emmett, that's a 2-man job. It's a 2-man job when you've got 2 men. He rinsed his cup and went out. And he did not look at the table by the vending machine, where Del Ashby was eating a sandwich and not chewing. The boot of a bucket elevator is the pit at the bottom, where the belt turns around a pulley. You get in through a hatch, no way to see out, no way to be seen. At 20 past 11, Emmett locked the power box with padlock 604 and hung his tag on it and wrote his name on the line in pencil. Then he stood a second and read it. 1 lock, 1 key, 1 man. Then he opened the door of the box and took out 2 fuse blocks and put them in his back pocket. He climbed down into the boot at 11:34 and made noise for 6 minutes. Then he came up and he and Dutch stepped into the alcove behind the cabinets and waited. At 11:52, they heard a car door in the lot, then a trunk lid. Dutch has said since that he did not understand that sound until he saw Emmett's face in the panel lights. Small, red and small green, nothing else in that room. The door opened at 11:56. Del came in without a flashlight because he had grown up in that room. He went to the 3rd panel and found the hasp by touch. The bolt cutters made 2 sounds. The first was the handles coming apart. The second was shorter. Brass hitting concrete is a sound you do not forget. It does not ring. It knocks once, like a knuckle on a door. Then Del Ashby reached up and closed the breaker, and the elevator did not run. He did it again. He opened it and closed it and stood there with his hand on the handle. The building stayed silent. 2 fuse blocks were in the back pocket of a man standing 14 feet away. He tried the 3rd panel. He tried the main. It won't run, Emmett Crandall said. Del did not move. Sure. You want to know why it won't run? Emmett came out of the alcove. Merle taught me the lock. After he died, I taught myself the fuses. 6 years I've carried them in my pocket, and 6 years every man in this plant has laughed at me about it. Emmett, I'm in that boot right now. That's what you thought. You closed that breaker with me in the bottom of a pit. I was not going to run it. You closed it twice. I was going to leave the lock cut on the floor so they'd find it in the morning. His voice was fast now, and reasonable. That is what it always is. I was going to make you look like a man who breaks his own lockout. That is all it was. To do that, you had to close the breaker. To make it look real. To make it look real, Emmett said. That's what you said the first time too, isn't it? Not out loud, in your head. It's a shortcut, it's fine. I've done it 11 times. Dutch Peevler stepped out of the alcove with his phone already recording. Del Ashby turned around and saw the union representative of Local 1109 standing in the doorway. That is a coincidence of numbering that nobody in Redgate has ever gotten used to. On the 24th at 9 in the morning, the terminal suspended Emmett Crandall pending investigation for entering a confined space without a standby attendant. Which was true. He had. They took his badge at the guard shack. A man he had trained walked him out to the lot. Neither one said a word the whole way because there was nothing to say. Silas was sitting in the wagon by the fence. He had been there since 8. He watched his guardian walk 200 feet across gravel carrying a milk crate of his own tools. He did not get out of the car. Emmett did not ask him to. That was the bottom of it. Right there. Not the file, not the lock, not the garage. A 17-year-old sitting in a car with his hands in his lap, watching, and not able to make himself open the door. The all-plant safety meeting started at 10 on the morning of Thursday the 25th in the maintenance bay. 90 folding chairs, 2 coffee urns. Renata Bly in the third row with a clipboard on her knee. Lowell Barrow ran it. He is the plant manager. He is 61, and he is not a bad man. That is the part of this that people in Redgate still argue about at the diner. He did the housekeeping items, then he did the announcement. Before we run the training block, I've got something good. He had a plaque in his hand. Effective the 1st of October, Del Ashby is stepping up as Director of Safety for this facility. 90 people clapped. For those of you newer, Del's been on the safety committee 11 years. Every lockout permit in this plant is going to have his name on it. I don't think there's a man in this room who's going to lose sleep about that. Del stood and did the thing where you wave everybody back down. And Dutch Peevler stood up at the back and said, "Point of order." Behind him, in the doorway of the maintenance bay, stood Emmett Crandall. He was with a union representative, and that gave him a right to be in that building. He's suspended, Dutch. He's a member in good standing, and this is a safety meeting, and I'm exercising Article 9. Dutch had the contract folded in his hand. Run your video, Lowell. We'll sit. Barrow could have thrown them out. He has said since that he wishes he had, and also that he does not. He hit the lights and started the video. The bay has a white wall at the north end, and the projector throws 10 feet wide. In a grain plant, the air is never clean. The beam is a solid thing, cutting across 90 people. The video is 14 minutes. At minute 6, it reaches the case study, and the power box comes up on that wall, 3 meters tall. Emmett Crandall stood up. He walked down the center aisle with a 4x6 photograph in his hand and stepped into the beam. 90 people watched a man in a canvas coat walk into a projector beam with dust turning around him. Nobody stopped him. He reached up and held the small photograph against the bottom edge of the big one. His hand went up on that wall 3 meters tall. Under it, blown up past the size of a man's head, was a padlock, and a tag, and a number, and a name in pencil on a line. 1109, M. Ashby. The video kept playing. The voice kept talking. Somebody in the second row said something that was not a word. "Turn it off," Barrow said. Nobody moved for a second because the man at the projector cart was 24 years old and had never had a room look at him. "Turn it off, son." The lights came up. Emmett walked to the front table where the plaque was and set 2 things on it. Brass on wood makes a specific sound in a quiet room. He did it twice. 2 padlocks, one stamped 1109, one stamped 604. Both cut through the shackle on the same side, and the 2 cut faces sat there under the lights with the same angle and the same bright torn edge. Same set of jaws, 6 years apart. "Somebody tell me what's on the table," Renata Bly said, and she stood up when she said it. "Ma'am, you can't just walk in here and start." "Mr. Barrow, I have been in your building 3 times this month, and I have your permit application on my desk." She did not raise her voice either. Neither of them did, all morning, and that is what people remember. "Sit down." 1109 is Merle Ashby's lock. It was cut 6 years ago, off the box that runs the mixer he was inside of. Emmett did not raise his voice one time in that room. It never came back to the tool crib. It has been in a toolbox in a garage on Kessler Road since that afternoon. And the second one? 604 is mine. It was cut off panel 3 in the electrical room at 11:56 on Tuesday night, while I was in the boot of number 2. 90 people made a sound. Barrow said Emmett, and had no second word. "Mr. Barrow?" Renata Bly had her clipboard down at her side now, which is how you know an inspector has stopped inspecting. In the file, is there a lock removal authorization? There is. Read me the line that says the lock holder was contacted before the lock was removed. Lowell Barrow stood at the front of his own maintenance bay in front of 90 of his own people, and did not answer. "There isn't one," Renata Bly said. "There is no such line, because that form does not have one, because at this facility nobody ever asks." And then in the 5th row, Silas Ashby stood up. 12 days earlier, his legs had refused to carry him a 4th step toward that hatch. He took the 4th step in a room full of folding chairs instead. He had come with Dutch. Nobody knew that. He had been sitting there the whole time with his hands between his knees. "I pulled the switch," he said. The room turned around. I want everybody to hear me say it because it's the only part I've ever been sure of. I was 11. It was a Saturday. I swept the crib floor for $5. Then I went and pulled the switch by the door because I always pulled it and my dad always yelled at me for it. "Son," Barrow said, "I pulled it and nothing happened. I pushed it in and pulled it again and nothing happened." His voice was going, and he kept going anyway. "Then somebody banged on something down by the electrical room, and then it started. That's the order. That's always been the order, and I've been told for 6 years that I've got it backwards." Somebody in the fourth row said, "Let him talk." Somebody else said it louder. Emmett Crandall turned around in the front of that room and looked at the boy across 90 people. "You did pull it," he said. "You pulled it twice, Emmett." And nothing happened because a man had locked that machine out and put his name on it. He said it slow. He was only going to get to say it once. Pulling that switch was the safest thing anybody did in that building that day. "Say it again," Silas said. "Which part?" "The last part." Pulling that switch was the safest thing anybody did in that building that day. Nobody clapped. It was not that kind of room. Marva Kolstad, in the back row by the urns, took her glasses off and did not put them back on. Del Ashby was arrested in the parking lot at 20 to 12 beside a truck with a folded moving blanket in the trunk. Here is the part that does not go the way it should. He was never charged with anything that happened on the 11th of October. The state's attorney took it seriously. She had the lock. She had the crop. She had the authorization stamped 41 minutes after the ambulance, and a pattern handed to her by the 23rd. What she did not have was the one element she needed, that Del Ashby knew a man was in that machine when he cut the lock. Only one person alive could put the banging before the mixer in order. "How long have you known this was coming?" Silas asked her. "Since the day I read who paid for the sessions." "He paid because he felt bad." "Maybe he did." The state's attorney did not soften it. A man can feel bad and buy a shield with the same check. And on a Tuesday in November, the defense filed a motion. It asked for 6 years of a minor's counseling records. Del Ashby had paid for those records, every session, every mile, to Quincy. And in the third folder, in the summary from the second year, a licensed professional had written 2 clinical phrases. Reconstructed memory, unstable event sequencing. The same page recommended against relying on the patient's recall of the incident. "He bought the boy's memory," Dutch Peevler said afterward, "and then he bought the paper that says the memory is no good." The state's attorney called them in and told them to their faces. It took 40 minutes and it cost her something. Then she charged what she could charge and called a lawyer in Springfield who worked for a different government. The false statement count was not hers to file. A form sworn to a federal agency belongs to the United States Attorney. The 2 offices ran the case together, which in that district is less common than people think. False statement to a federal agency. For the reconfirmation, Del signed on the 22nd. An attempted aggravated battery and reckless endangerment for the electrical room on the 23rd. He took 6 years. 6, Silas said in the hallway afterward, "for lying on a form. For lying on a form and for Tuesday night. Not for my dad. No, say it plain. Not one day of it is for your dad." Dutch did not look away. "And I am not going to dress that up because you have been lied to enough by grown men in that building. Not one day of those 6 years is for Merle Ashby." Lowell Barrow retired in January, which is the word the company used. The terminal was cited for 11 violations, 3 of them willful, including the earlier lock removals in Marva's book. The loadout shut down 2 weeks. Dutch filed on it and won reporting pay for every hour, the first grievance that local had won in 6 years. There are men in Redgate who will tell you that is the real ending of this story. The training video was pulled. When the new one came out in the spring, page 9 had the whole photograph on it and no name at all. Emmett's suspension became a written warning for the confined space entry, which he committed and does not argue about. He went back on days. He fixes the mixers. The town did not fully come back. Some people brought pie. Some still crossed to the other side of the street outside the hardware store, and they will do that for the rest of their lives. Marva Kolstad worked until the following fall. On her last day, the office asked whether she wanted a fresh allocation board. The old one still had a name on it from 6 years back, with a line of ink through it instead of cut out. She said no. She had drawn that line herself with a ballpoint pen, standing at that counter alone. She could not make herself take the scissors to it. Silas stayed through harvest. He worked the scale house that fall. In December, he went to his aunt's in Fort Wayne. Emmett drove him, carried 2 bags up a stairway, and came home the same night. He was gone 2 years. You can take almost anything from a child, and he will grow around it. Take what he remembers about himself, and he grows around a hole. He came back in September and signed on at Halstead as an apprentice. That means 4 years, a book of hours, and a man willing to sign for you. You sure? Marva said. 4 years is 4 years. He's sure, Emmett said. I asked him. Silas put his hand flat on the counter. I'm sure. Emmett Crandall signed for him. On the first morning, they went to the tool crib. Marva still comes in 2 days a week because the company never found anybody who would keep the book the way she keeps it. She had the old steel dies out in their wooden case and a new brass padlock with nothing on it yet. She set them one at a time and hit them with a 2-pound hammer, 4 times. Then she blew the brass dust off and slid it across the counter. 1 lock, 1 key, 1 man, she said. Say it back to me. 1 lock, 1 key, 1 man. Good. Now here's the other part, and this part is mine. She put the ledger around so he could see the line with his name on it. Nobody gets to be nobody in my crib. Silas picked it up. Brass is heavier than people expect. He closed the shackle with his thumb, and it made that sound, 1 knock, like a knuckle on a door. Then he counted 5 $1 bills onto the counter, 1 at a time, the way he used to at 11 years old after sweeping a floor. Marva Kolstad looked at the money, and then she looked out the window. What am I supposed to say, he said. Emmett Crandall was standing behind him with his hat in his hand. Say it. And Silas Ashby read his own number off the brass. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done the moment that boy looked at the tag and asked what the number was. And if this one got to you, send it to somebody who has spent years believing a story about themselves that another person wrote.